going on, everybody? What is happening? Paul Turner here from the discipleproject.net. Glad to be with you. Let me just fix my camera just a little bit. There we go. And today, welcome to Office Hours. I'm going to start doing Office Hours hopefully every Wednesday from like 11 to 11:30, something like that, depending on how many questions you all have. And that's really the goal of doing Office Hours, is if you have questions about your program tonight, or if you have questions about youth ministry in general, or you have very specific youth ministry questions that you might have, then I want to help you out there. I would like to take my 30 years of youth ministry experience and give it to you if I can. Feel free that if you have questions during this, go ahead and drop them in the chat. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and start with the questions that I've already received and then work on it. Maybe some of those apply to you, maybe they don't. And once again, if you watch this later on, feel free to go ahead and add a question down there, and I'll use that for the next Office Hours. Okay? All right, so first up, anyone that has a small homeschooled youth group. This is right up my alley here. It says our teens want to grow in the group size, but they have no interaction with other people and so forth, other than people at church looking for ideas. Well, that is quite a few of my students. Well, it's in between homeschool, private school, and public school, and it's a third probably for me. But I've had other youth groups where it was almost 50 to 70% of the students that I had were homeschooled. And so I think we begin with the premise of why. I know why we want the youth ministry to grow. I understand that. The question is there a pressure to grow? In other words, is your senior pastor or board members or whoever it may be, is it a pressure to grow that I have to grow and all I have is homeschools to work with? Or do I have, in this case, the question is, I have teens that want to grow the group, but they are homeschooled. And so I think it's a matter of, I think you got to work together with parents and your pastor on this, because, pastors who want their youth groups to grow, possibly unaware of the dynamics that you're working with. I was unaware in some of my youth groups. I was unaware that I had so many homeschool students. Once again, it's part of us in our brains as youth workers saying, well, everybody's, of course, everybody's on the same page here, right? And that is not always the case. First of all, you may want the youth group to grow and they may not want it to grow. And in weird cases, maybe you don't want it to grow and they want it to grow. I don't know. But what I do know is that I think you have to get everybody on the same page if you're talking about this kind of dynamic, because there are some parents, if you ask them if they want the youth ministry to grow, they might not. And so they're not going to be helpful in that way. And then you have some students that might not. So I think you have to find a consensus between your public school students, your homeschool students, your parents, your pastor, because a lot of this is gonna, I've tried to grow youth groups where they did not want the youth group to grow. That's just the way it was, because of those kids that would get brought in. And I'm like, what are we doing here? What do we, we're not on the same page. And so for me, trying to, put this puzzle together, you really got to start with getting everybody on the same page. That's where I say you have to start. And you have to, if everybody does get on the same page, say, yes, we want the youth ministry to grow. We just don't want, bad elements. And I agree. Listen, there's certain dynamics that your youth group can handle, and sometimes it can't handle. It depends who you're reaching out to, and can you bring them in? Is your church welcoming to them? Is your youth group welcoming to them? And if they're not, well, then, you're going to hurt yourself in the long run, because you're going to bring students in who are going to come into a group that doesn't really want them, that weren't on the same page as you. And now you have to teach them to love them when they didn't sign up for that in the first place, And so, so I'd say first and foremost, get everybody on the same page. Do you want the youth group to grow? Okay, what are we willing to do that? If we're homeschooled and have a lot of kids that just don't have contact, I would do maybe I would, use social media. And I've been pitching this idea to a lot of people, and I'm going to do it with my group here soon, where I put out a message that we're going to pay, like we're going to meet, have youth at the local Jack's or wherever it may be, Taco Bell, and say, look, we're going to tag it up. If you were between the ages of 14 and 18, we're giving away free tacos tonight at wherever it is, whatever food you're giving away. And then when those students come in, you're going to pay for whatever, you're using church credit card or cash, whatever you're doing. And then you're going to swipe that and you're going to pay for them, pay for their food, and then give them some information and just say, hey, would love for you to come to youth next week. Or have adults there with you that are participating with you that can engage in conversation with these students. They come and say, hey, we'd love to just talk to you for a sec. Do you go to church anywhere? Well, hey, we'd love to be able to invite you and be a part. This is something we're doing as a youth ministry because we know that there are teenagers out there looking for community, and we would love to offer community to you. So I would definitely use social media in that way and do a live, go live and show what's going on because I find that, when that motion, that action begets action, right? And motion begets motion. That when you're filming it or you're going live or, whatever you're doing with it, then that tends to pick up traction. You have content to be able to share with other people to show this is what we've done. And so, yeah, I would just say, look, if you're dealing with a youth group that is predominantly homeschooled, number one, get everybody on the same page, pastors, parents, students. Then you decide on strategy. How do we want to do this? Whether that's doing a live event at a restaurant somewhere, giving away free food, or service projects where students go out and help, maybe help organizations to kind of put themselves out there and kind of declare what kind of church we are and what kind of youth group we have. Or it's just going to be places where kids are hanging out, and you got to go to those places. And students have to be willing to go there as part of their journey and as part of their discipleship journey. Okay. All right. Number 2, and once again, if you are just joining us, thank you so much for being here. If you have questions about youth ministry, drop them in the chat there, and I will get to it. I got about 2 or 3 more questions here, and hopefully I will be able to get to your question before we're done, which hopefully we're not going to be here too long, but this is why I'm doing office hours, is because if you're a youth pastor, and you say, I'm really looking for some answers, I would like some answers, maybe Paul, can you help me? Yes, I think maybe I can help you. So, all right, number 2, what is your church policy around texting students individually, or your leaders texting students individually? Well, you're not going to stop, students from texting students, obviously. But, we do not have a policy, and it's not bad to have a policy. We use GroupMe. So that is basically that's a public app, where it's like a message board where I just kind of post in there. As a general rule, I don't text with the female students in my group. If anything needs to be communicated, it'll be communicated on the public board. I'll tag somebody, ask a question. I mean, it's not like in-depth or counseling or anything like that. It's just general questions. If they have questions, then I will then send them to somebody else. I have adults in our church who I can be able to, offer their name to or something like that. So look, I think that'd probably be a good person that you probably want to ask that question to. I don't think that's something that I'm going to tackle. And I know if you're young, you want to help everybody. But in this day and age, you have to be able to watch those things. You have to be able to guard yourself against, and it may be totally nothing wrong. It may be completely innocent, all those things. But man, how many of those things have gone sideways for so many people? So yeah, if you want to make a church policy, or a youth group policy, and say, hey, only guys are going to text with guys and girls are going to text with girls. And then you can also say, look, as a youth pastor, listen, I'm not going to text you unless it's an absolute emergency. And if it's an emergency, I'm going to connect you with somebody. If you're female, I'm going to connect you with somebody. If you're a guy, I'll do my best to work with you and be able to, help you work out and text or whatever, get on a phone call, or, have a meeting at the church next week, kind of in a public area, those kind of things. But don't ever put yourself in a corner through texting or through being individually alone or something like that, because it doesn't do you any good. It just creates drama maybe that you don't want. So yeah, but I think that's an important thing you have to go over with your adult leaders if you have adult leaders in your group, because sometimes they don't know or they don't understand, and they have a passion and they have a heart for these young people. But make sure, just keep it to where it's girls texting girls only, guys texting guys only, and then you being careful with whom you're texting with and trying to connect students that have deeper needs, maybe with the proper person that they need to be with, rather than yourself maybe. Okay. All right, number 3, any good ideas for a tacky prom event? Well, that's a good question. Several years ago, did a thrift store prom, and we had a ton of fun doing a thrift store prom, where you just say, look, go to the thrift store, find your tackiest thrift store outfit. And at the time, I think the song Thrift Store or Poppin' Tags, whatever that was called, was real popular. And so it was kind of a fun dynamic where those things kind of lined up. And so, we had a great time. We had a photo booth area where you could go and take pictures. We had some funky, music. We did some things between Christian music and, some oldies and stuff like that. And we just had a good time. We had a great time just kind of doing that. But I would recommend anything, going to a thrift store is pretty tacky. You can make it a disco kind of night. You can do an 80s night. It's pretty tacky. But there's all kinds of things out there. I recommend going on things like Pinterest and things like that, where you can go search that kind of stuff and find out some really fun, tacky ideas if you're doing some sort of prom alternative. All right, last question. If you have questions, it's your time to jump in and leave a question below if you have in the chat there. So if you have a question, go ahead and leave it now, because this is the last question. We're going to go from there. It says, do you ever feel left out from the other adults? Do you ever feel left out from what the other adults do in the church? I feel like they forget about me being a person too and needing friends, and just see me as someone who works with the youth all the time. All the time. It is a unique situation, because you work with teenagers, you get pigeonholed or typecast or stereotyped or whatever, to where, that they just work with the youth. They don't really need friends. They're in the ministry. They don't need friends, right? And so, yeah, it happens all the time, where, and not just to the youth pastor, children's pastor, sometimes associate pastors. A lot of times it's hard to find friends in the church because you have a pastoral role and nobody wants you to know their business. It's just that simple. You're not going to get a ton of invites, maybe over to somebody's house or whatever, just because because of your role and your title and your position. But that's why I recommend, and as much as it's important to me to have friends, I'm a little older now. It was really hard. It's really hard when you're young, because you are isolated in that community, and it's really hard to get out because you're so busy planning events and doing those things. I would say if you're in your 20s, 30s, and especially your 40s, I would make sure you have some not outdoor necessarily, but outside the church friends that you can go with, people from other churches or just some Christian friends, because it doesn't get any easier. It doesn't matter. I'm 55, going to be 55 this year, and it doesn't matter how old you are. The community is the community. If you're not intentionally searching and trying to make friends and going and finding whatever your hobbies are, right? Going to, ballroom dancing or painting or, some sort of bird watching or hiking. Join some groups that are going to be outside the church, where you can make friends outside the church, because everybody in the church is not thinking about you. And that's about as honestly as I can put it. They're not asking, they're just like, oh, God must take care of them. And the reality is that many youth workers, myself included, find themselves trying to build a life. And suddenly you look around. The problem is that you go in it, you're in it long enough that you look around and go, and you ask your wife, if you're married or if you're by yourself, but if you're married, you go, do we have any friends? I mean, it's Friday night. We don't have anything to do. What do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? And you kind of get into that mode where you are trying to reestablish yourself to having groups of friends. I would suggest having dinner parties with adults only at your house, right? Once a month. You be the instigators. I know that's, once again, another event you have to kind of put on. But sometimes if you don't do it, nobody else is going to do it for you. So if you have an opportunity to have a dinner or a game night at your house, do it. Schedule it. Make it happen. Make those lifelong friends in this church that if you should ever leave this church, you could still have friends that you could talk with, communicate with, that would be outside of the context of ministry. Sometimes we just do the job, do the ministry in that context, and we're ministry friends, right? You helped me with an event, you went to camp with us, but outside of that, we didn't do anything. So if you want those kinds of friends and that kind of fellowship, sadly, as the youth pastor or as a position in that, even a pastor sometimes deals with this, go find friends outside, right? Join other groups, whether it's something, like I said, like board game night, or you get a movie group together and say, hey, I'm going to the movies, who'd like to go, and do a movie group type of thing. But yeah, it's still hard work out there in the ministry, and nobody's thinking about your friendships. You have to think about your friendships. You have to think about the relationships you want to build and what you want to do with that towards the future. So, but that is it, guys. I hope that you've enjoyed this. If you, once again, have any questions, feel free to leave them. If you're watching this in the future, I will look back at these questions and maybe use these for the next office hours. If you've enjoyed this video, be sure to click the thumbs up button. That tells me you like the video and you want more of them. And just tell me in the comments, which one of these maybe resonates with you. Tell me, which one of these questions maybe was applicable to you. And like I said, if you don't have, if none of those were applicable, well, then ask your own question, and then you'll be able to, I'll be able to answer it in the next office hours. Okay. All right. Well, that is it for today, guys. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. We'll talk to you later.